Okay, we're back. Memo from the Superintendent of Leadership and Parent Engagement, Prince Harrell and Tony Ho. Welcome.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the equity team from the Leadership and Parent Engagement Department are pleased to provide an update on the 2025 to 2026 academic school year, including strategic initiatives, student engagement events, professional development programs designed to foster a culture of inclusion, dignity, and belonging across the Ottawa Catholic School Board. The equity team continues to uphold our spiritual theme. We are called to build bridges by creating connection and fostering unity through student engagement and voice, professional development, and strategic partnerships. Tony Ho will be doing the presentation on behalf of the equity team and will be happy to answer any questions that the Board of Trustees would have.
Good afternoon, or sorry, good evening, everyone. As Dr. Horo said, my name is Tony. I am the equity consultant, and this is our third equity update for this year. Now, for this one in particular, we just want to highlight some of the excellent activities and samples of the equity work that we've done this year. So it's not a full range view, but more of a focused snapshot. To start, let's look at the student engagement events. In October, we celebrated our 6th annual Black Student Forum. This forum isn't just an event, it's a leadership lab where students from across the school board shared their voices, they networked, and directly informed our equity strategies. In March, our Black graduation coaches, in collaboration with ISSSD's art department, created a unique learning opportunity for Black and racialized students within the OCSB called the Afrofuturism and Black Joy Art Contest. Students were invited to the National Gallery of Canada to learn different art techniques and to help express their inner artistry towards the theme of Afrofuturism and Black excellence. Many of the art pieces were displayed and recognized for a single day at the National Gallery afterwards. In April, we celebrated our OCSB Standing Against Racism Week. This year's theme was based on Dr. Martin Luther King's vision of a beloved community, which is a world where justice, equity, and the inherent dignity of every person is realized. During this week, we curated a plethora of events and activities for all K-12 students and educators. From engaging read-alouds to on-feed career panels, we provided a deep collaboration across all departments to ensure rich learning experiences for every classroom. In a few days, actually, May 14th, we'll be celebrating our inaugural Asian Student Forum, of which I am pleased to invite all of you to attend. It'll be taking place at Notre Dame High School. This event will be held at Notre Dame, and it is a milestone in our commitment to empowering Asian student voices and allowing them to share their unique identity. Additionally, in June, we will mark the month of our upcoming Student Heart Forum. This annual event highlights our commitment to centering the voice and the humanity of the 2S LGBTQ+ students in our board. Next, I'd like to move on to the community outreach and engagement. So equity is more than just itself. It's more than just a silo. It's a community effort. We've strengthened ties with international embassies all across Ottawa this year to bring authentic cultural learning experiences to many of our schools, such as the Japanese obon dancing in high schools and the Korean art and culture workshops for both elementary and high school. Additionally, we've been partnering with the Ukrainian embassy to trade Holodomor resources for our high school in future, for potential or future curriculum expectations. Simultaneously, both the Equity and ISSD's Contemporary Studies departments have deepened our partnerships with the Israeli Foundation and the Canadian Holocaust Education and Scholarship Foundation, or CHES, to provide robust Holocaust education and combat anti-Semitism in our schools and communities. This month, we are also collaborating with the Atlantic Canada Holocaust Education Foundation, or HF, to pilot traveling Holocaust education exhibits in 2 of our high schools. Last week, they were at St. Joseph High School, and next week, they'll be at Holy Trinity High School. Additionally, we've partnered with PJ Library to provide free books for all schools and Learning Commons as well. Now, in regards to supporting our educational staff through PD, we have accomplished 3 goals. First, we successfully provided professional development for all of our equity representatives in our schools. This year was the first year where we marked the time where we were given for a new equity representative for each school, something that we've never had before. We provided these reps with much needed learning opportunities, best practices, and strategies on how to support students with inclusive and restorative practices. Second, we have continued to roll out our board's focus on anti-Black racism PD. And finally, we developed and provided administrator training for the ministry-mandated anti-racism PD in December. On top of all that, we have also provided a variety of leading and learning journeys for all of our staff at the OCSB throughout the school year to help them with their journeys of reflection, self-discovery, and growth towards becoming anti-racist. And finally, the Equity Department continues to provide school PD for staff in the forms of lunch and learns, breakfast and learns, before and after school staff meetings and sessions on a variety of topics. The goal of all this is to address the use of harmful languages and systemic barriers that directly affect all of our schools. And with that, I would like to conclude. If there's any questions, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Questions or comments? Trustee Simpson.
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation, and you guys are really doing a lot of various activities to enrich our curriculum. My question is, our equity reps that you've gathered and given some professional development to, what other kind of support do you give them so that they can bring back resources that you've given them in your meetings and spread it or share it with the rest of the school and other teachers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's an excellent question. We provide a variety of, it wasn't just the in-person PD, but we were able to then have a collection of people who we could share those resources that we garner and also curate as well. So from having that single person, we are able to then provide those resources. And even the community partnerships that we have that internal person in the schools who we could connect with our community partners.
Just a supplemental question. Do they have any ability to share best practices with each other so that when something's worked really well for them at their school, they can share it with other folks so that they could try and implement the same initiative?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we actually encourage them to create a Google chat group called the Equity Reps chat, in which they were able to do such best practice discussions, both for the West End and the East End, and then we would compile it together.
Trustee Moore.
Thank you very much. You've done a lot of great work this year, gotten out to a lot of places and met a lot of people. My question is, when you look at inviting cultures into the community and you work with anti-racism, they sort of are balanced on the same teeter-totter. How do you plan going forward to keep that balance? Because it's easy to go one way or the other.
Well, that's a good question. Through you, Mr. Chair. And It's such a deep question, and it's not something that I want to be able to answer so lightly because our work is, it's something that is, it's difficult having these brave conversations, but in the same way, we try to mitigate harm. But sometimes it's important to address these things. One of the biggest things that we say with equity work and to make sure that everyone feels like they are seen is sometimes we have to confront those difficult things head on, and we don't shy away from it. So in regards to balancing community partners and our people, the first thing is we have to say, do we see and we hear those who often are disenfranchised or historically considered like, well, like myself, a racialized or unseen person. So when we do bring in these resources to the communities, the first thing we do is we see who are we serving in that community in particular, and then we try to align things. And of course, we always work with the administrators in the schools and the community itself before we do anything else.
To say thank you, Tony, for such a great answer. I have my degree in minority and multicultural education. So yes, I really appreciate that you take it all. It's a holistic approach to it, not just we're going to do one thing over here, we're going to do one thing over there, and yay, yay, yay. So thank you very much.
Is there any other questions or comments? Kira, no? Getting fidgety. Thank you very much for your presentation. Can I get a mover for the presentation, please? Trustee Melito? And Trustee Coburn? That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Leadership and Parent Engagement dated May 5th, 2026, entitled 2025-2026 Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Updates be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Memo from the Associate Director of Business Affairs, read the 2026-2027 preliminary budget information. Welcome, Associate Director Shimmons. And will be Ms. Donnelly joining you this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, Ms. Donnelly has caught a cold, which I hear is going around, so she sends her regrets. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're still awaiting the release of the core education funding grants, but while we do so, we will continue to roll out our preliminary budget information for the board's consideration. Tonight, we have two sections. First is the staffing section that details the full-time equivalent permanent staffing that has been incorporated into the preliminary budget. Given that the salaries and benefits represent a bit more than 80% of the board's overall budget, this section represents about $670 million at this time, and that will increase dependent upon the salary increases, which are yet unknown. The second section in the memo is Section G, Other Expenditures, which is currently totaling $108 million and provides the non-salaried budgets to support schools and departments to serve students, plus it provides for costs related to accommodating students in those schools. So if you would like to click into Section C, the first section listed in your memo, that section is staffing. So this first page of the staffing section includes a graph that breaks down into various categories, the staffing into direct classroom staff in blue, which includes teachers, ECEs, and EAs. The next one in green is learning resource staff and includes library and guidance, principals, school office, professionals and paraprofessionals, coordinators, consultants, and chaplains. The third, pupil accommodation in gold is finally the school custodial and the CEC planning and facilities staff. And finally, the board admin staff in orange includes trustees, directorate, and superintendents, HR, IT, finance, and the departments of ISSD, ESSD, SESS, and CONTED. Special education staffing is woven throughout these 4 envelope groupings, and so they're not broken out separately in this particular graph. The schedule that's attached details the permanent full-time equivalent staffing. These figures exclude casual interim employees, as well as positions that are funded through the one-time special grants. So those budgets will be finalized once we receive the final details in the core education funding grants. For the 26-27 school year, we are projecting a preliminary total of 5,806 permanent full-time equivalent staff. This is an increase of 93 FTEs compared to our original budget for the current year for 2025-26. Of that 93, 26 was growth, mostly teachers, that was added in the current school year, but 67 FTE of this increase is preliminary projected growth in staffing that will take effect for the upcoming school year, September 2026. This growth is primarily driven by a projected enrollment increase of 2.8%. Classroom staffing, which accounts for over 78% of our total FTE and includes an additional 59 classroom teachers and 5 special education teachers. While ECE staffing reflects a decrease of 8 full-time equivalent, these numbers will be adjusted as our kindergarten numbers come in. So it's a little early to add any further ECEs. Within Learning Resource Fund staffing, we have added 3 additional half-time vice principal positions for the coming year for our children's support schools, bringing the total to 7 half-time VPs. In addition, 4 additional half-time VPs have been added to schools to accommodate enrollment growth. I don't think that's me. I hope it's not me. Okay. And the preliminary budget also includes a principal position to support the ESL program. Conversely, the preliminary budget includes some reductions. 4 FTE were removed due to the closure of 2 early on sites, and 2 principal positions were consolidated as virtual moves into in-person sites at St. Anthony and Notre Dame. Finally, in the pupil accommodation and the board admin staffing sections, an additional 2.6 caretakers have been added to various sites based on school area space, including the addition of portables in those areas, as well as the St. Philip's addition. Additional HR staff has been added to manage the increased volume, including that of the updated police record check requirements. So for staffing, the planning department and the HR department continue to monitor enrollments, and staff, mostly teachers and ECEs, will be added accordingly for class size requirements as we finalize the budget in June. A decision on additional EA staffing will be made in accordance with available funding room when the core education grants are received. Now, I would like to move to the second schedule in your memo, so if you would like to click into the section G, Other Expenditures. I'll move over. Section G1 covers the summary of other expenditures by functional area. This section provides for all of the non-salaried costs to support students in the classroom and resource supports and supports students with school buses and school buildings. It also includes non-salary costs for central departments and interest on debt and depreciation. Looking at the schedule, the far left-hand column shows the board-approved original budget for the current school year of 25-26. This baseline has then been adjusted for in-year budget transfers, special grants released post-budget approval, and the recognition of deferred grants from the prior year. The preliminary budget request for the upcoming school year 26-27 is shown in the far right-hand column and stands at a preliminary total of $108 million. We're still awaiting the final 26-27 Responsive Education Program, REP grants, which are the one-time year-by-year grants. So no amounts have been included for those programs in the schedule at this time. We're also confirming the OSTA transportation costs to funding when the core ed is released. Excluding these 2 unknowns, our other expenditures budget has increased by $2.1 million, or about 2%. Pending the release of core education funding, we have maintained a status quo budget approach. However, there are some key changes to highlight. Number one, in order to meet the growing demands of specialized equipment for special education students, the SIA resource budget was increased by $500,000. The offset for this increase is for fewer assistive technology mentor learning partners, which allows us to balance that SIA funding envelope. The second is startup budgets of $200,000 have been added to the budget for the Fernbank North Elementary School and the recently acquired Century Elementary School, both that are scheduled to open in September 2027. Third, for school budgets, there's a net decrease of $1.3 million for school budgets, which is made up from the removal of $1.5 million of one-time investments that was in the current year's budget. This was partially offset by a $200,000 increase to school budgets due to higher school enrollments, generating more school budget. Number four, learning technologies sees a $400,000 increase to address cybersecurity and rising software license costs, some of which are driven by pupil enrollment, which is increasing. Five, planning and facilities expenditures are up by $1.3 million, or about 5.5%. And this is primarily due to inflationary pressures on utilities, mostly hydro, and maintenance contracts for snow, grass, garbage, and the like. And six, early learning budgets will increase by $700,000 due to higher enrollments in the before and after programs. This cost is fully offset by revenues. And lastly, you will notice at the bottom of your schedule that the multi-year reserve projects have not yet been included in this preliminary budget schedule for 26-27. Once a final bottom line analysis is done, when the grants are received, we will be able to determine if these initiatives will fit within the 1% deficit drawdown again this year. That summarizes those two sections, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? Trustee Moore?
I got very curious, and it's off topic a bit, but prior learning assessments in the elementary and secondary has a budget of about 7,000. But in continuing education, where I guess I'm assuming most adults are coming from, there is no budget. I understand there's staff, that's separate. But why does the elementary, secondary need resources and the adults don't get any or require any? That's just my curiosity.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. That's a very detailed question, Trustee Moore. I would have to look into it to be sure. I would expect that if there would be a PLAR budget as part of continuing ed, but it may not be listed as a title in here, but I can dig into that and get you an answer back.
Moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Whitted. The memorandum from the Associate Director of Business Affairs dated May 6, 2026, entitled 2026-2027 Preliminary Budget Information and accompanying budget documentation be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
15-9.
Memo from the Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services gifted screening and intervention. Welcome, Superintendent Benton. Welcome, Jennifer, Tori, and Dr. Dubois. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to be joined this evening by Principal Jennifer Pritchett, Psychologist Dr. Angèle Desbois, and Principal Tori White, who will be sharing an update with the trustees on our high ability screening and intervention pilot project. In the presentation, they will review the progress to date regarding how the pilot project has been phased in over this year. In particular, they will focus on two significant shifts in our screening practices with the goal of creating a more equitable and inclusive identification process. The first shift is to use the Naglieri Abilities Test, a nonverbal measure that minimizes the impact of language and cultural background. And the second shift they will address is using the use of the MTSS multi-tiered system of supports approach in order to expand student access to Tier 2 programming for high-ability learners within their community schools. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Desbois to begin.
Last year, some of you may remember, we had proposed this phase-in project, which focused on two significant shifts in our screening and identification practices. So as mentioned, moving from a nomination-based process to universal screening, and secondly, replacing the Canadian Cognitive Abilities Test, otherwise known as the CCAT, with the Naglieri General Abilities Test, also known as the NGAT. Our goal is to create a more equitable and inclusive identification process while we continue to monitor and refine implementation. So within a multi-tiered system of support approach, or MTSS, programming is organized to respond to different student learning needs. At the foundational level, or Tier 1, all students have access to differentiated instruction and flexible grooming opportunities within the regular classroom. At the most intensive level, Tier 3, students who meet board criteria may access specialized programming through the Program for Gifted Learners. As we continue to strengthen this model, an important area of growth is the development of Tier 2 supports within students' home schools. Tier 2 programming creates additional opportunities for students demonstrating high ability, advanced potential, or strong readiness for enriched opportunities targeting learning experiences. A key part of this work is continuously monitoring student growth and responsiveness to instruction so that educators can make informed decisions about appropriate enrichment, challenges, and supplementary supports. So as previously reviewed, a key advantage of the Naglieri as an assessment measure is that it's nonverbal. Unlike assessments that rely heavily on language and reading skills, this tool is designed to minimize the impact of language proficiency, cultural background, and language-based learning differences on student performance. So by combining universal screening with a nonverbal assessment measure, we're strengthening our ability to identify a wider range of learners who may benefit from enriched and advancement programming opportunities, including students whose strengths may not always be immediately evident through traditional processes. As part of the phase-in process, select sites received staff training on the NGAT, which took place in January, followed by administration to grade 4 students shortly thereafter. The NGAT was selected very intentionally because, as mentioned, it supports both equity and accessibility. The CCAT process remains available board-wide through nomination, while the NGAT universal screening process was intentionally limited to select schools during this phase-in stage. The gradual approach supports strong implementation fidelity and allows schools time to build the Tier 2 supports needed to respond effectively as more students are identified. Our goal is to ensure identification is matched with meaningful programming and intervention capacity. This phase-in initiative also focused on database decision-making at the school level by providing a more comprehensive view of both student learning profiles and overall class-wide needs. Rather than relying on a single assessment or single data point, school teams reviewed multiple sources of data, including classroom assessment data, literacy and numeracy screening data, report card and provincial assessments data also where available. Looking at data collectively helped schools identify patterns across classrooms and made informed decisions about classroom programming for students. By doing this phase-in, we're building capacity with teachers, the MTSS framework, and ensuring that students receive differentiated supports at Tier 1 and Tier 2. The process has also helped schools identify when additional supports, additional data, or screening or interventions could be beneficial.
So this is an outline of the approach that we've used this year to start to phase in the NGAT and then to introduce instructional practices to meet the students' needs. We are on track with our timeline, and we are in the final phase of the instruction plan. Our next step is to fully review and evaluate all the information we have gathered to inform our next steps. This year's work was highly collaborative and involved a large team from special education and student services, as well as a school-based team of administrators, classroom teachers, and resource teachers. We focused on three main areas: phasing in the screening, capacity building for teachers to build instructional practices to support high-ability learners, and providing evidence-based science instruction for students. There were 6 schools involved in the project this year. Based on the recommendation from the NGAT assessment tool, we selected the top 10th percentile of students to participate in targeted programming in their community school. We chose this group of students to provide opportunity for those who would not otherwise have been identified through CCAT testing, to build teacher capacity, and also to assess the students' response to intervention. We had an instructional inquiry where we worked with the teachers to develop new practices, and we introduced an evidence-based resource called the Earth Beneath Our Feet that targets specific learning skills for high-ability students through science instruction. We focused on collaboration through co-teaching, co-prepping, and, oh, there's a typo in our slide deck, it should say co-assessing. We are now completing the final lessons, and we will gather the feedback from the teacher with the goal to develop sustainability. Principal White is here to tell us a little bit about St. Bernadette's experience.
Good evening, everybody. From a school perspective, this data has created very interesting conversations about our own biases as educators and how we define intelligence. We acknowledge that as a group, that sometimes we see SMART is often compliance, organization, and high literacy, which is important, but can be a gate around learning. Sometimes we equate easy to teach with high intelligence, which is a blind spot. The data specifically unmasked exceptional learners who were previously hidden. For instance, a student in Empower at Tier 3 support who takes a lot of time to produce work and share their thinking. Their score showed high cognitive ability, which really underscored for us that slow output does not mean a lack of ability. This student is now raising their hand, participating, and recognizes their own abilities. In addition, testing the whole grade cohort moves away from a reactive referral system for testing to a form of testing which is more equitable. Beyond this high ability testing, we have a new data point on all of our grades 4 students that can be used for a variety of priority interventions in concert with other screening and progress monitoring. And as a principal, that's very exciting as we look ahead to next year and how will we plan for these grade 5 students.
So our plan moving forward is to continue to introduce the NGAT screener to additional schools. Through this initial phase this year, we have identified some key factors that need to be addressed as we move forward. First, ensuring fidelity. It is key that teachers are properly trained and supported to ensure that the NGAT is administered correctly. Second, supporting data analysis to avoid errors in interpretation which can result in either false positives or false negatives, as well as ineffective programming. And third, improving instructional practices and supporting diverse learners by using the data to inform programming. Our next steps will include working with our research officers to ensure that our current gifted criteria is aligned with this assessment tool, as well as based on the instructional inquiry with our evidence-based tools, we will be developing a plan to support high-ability students with sustainability at the school level. This is not meant to replace the Tier 3 program for gifted learners, but rather to provide multiple entry points and increased learning opportunities for high-ability learners within their community school. And now we're ready for any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Trustee Moore.
Thank you very much. Maybe things have changed since my kids went to the gifted learning program. So grade 4s no longer go, is that correct?
Grade 4s are still going. We haven't changed anything for the gifted program, and we haven't eliminated the CCAT yet. While we're introducing the NGAT, we still have the CCAT and the former process in place.
So eventually, when all grade 4s are tested during November, December, that means that they will not be attending PGL until grade 5 or 6.
No.
Eventually, when you get the whole board done.
That would be if we were to continue testing at grade 4, which is not necessarily the plan. Right now, since grade 3s are being tested with CCAT, we aren't able to retest them immediately with the NGAT. To have grade 3s doing CCAT, EQAO, and NGAT would be a lot. So for now, while we develop our practices and understand how the NGAT is used and can be effective, we're targeting grade 4s. But once the CCAT is eliminated, we will be able to transfer the NGAT to grade 3.
And supplemental? All these students that, so much of this research is 50 years old at this point in gifted education. The new approaches are wonderful and amazing. But what the research tells us is these kids, if they do not receive any help, are most likely to end up out of school never to finish high school. So will you be yeah, I have friends whose kids never finished, gifted. But are you going to be tracking these kids through their Ontario education number to see what the graduation results are? That if by doing this, we know now how many children just drop out. In 10 years, will we have numbers to show how many children are staying in?
So as we have more data points and more information and we're using the MTSS, yes, we are better able to track and monitor and look at the students' response to intervention and adapt their programming as they move through school.
Trustee Simpson Coburn, then Kira and Jade.
Slow output is not a reflection of cognitive ability is music to my ears, because we all know that we do have little friends that do have slow output and are never recognized for their cognitive abilities. I think this is great breakthrough stuff that you're doing, recognizing that the CCAT weighs heavily on verbal ability and reading. So I think I understand that you're trying to gradually implement this because fidelity to the NCAT is very important if you're truly going to identify tier 3 and tier 2 learners. My question is, I guess we're all very impatient with how long this is going to take, but I understand why we need to be careful about the way we implement it. My interest is in the tier 2 supports, because I always know that, you know, the kids in the 90th percentile are going to the tier 3 support, but you've got a lot of these children in you know, the 80th percentile or the low 90th percentile that don't make the cut for the gifted classes, but still need enrichment. So when you're talking about tier 2 supports, what kinds of things are you rolling out so that it doesn't look like just more work or just some enrichment, but rather leaning towards more critical thinking skills? So maybe Tori can answer that, because you're already trying to do that at your school.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could speak to the pilot project that is happening at St. Bernadette, that is exactly in answer to your question. And as we look ahead to next year, we look at how do we take the learning from this pilot project and keep that going, keep that momentum going. And the plan, as we look at it, we look at continuing that science and building creative scheduling across the school so that we can hit those targeted groups and differentiate that science instruction to meet the needs of those students. Because you're quite right, we've got kids of all kinds of different abilities, and we want to make sure that we're hitting those needs where they are. And so for our school, we're going to continue to focus on our learning from this year, from that science piece, and keep it going with our grade 5s.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We also have seen through the other schools in the pilot, when all the principals aren't here with us, other options and other ways that they're looking at how to use the data and how to address their practices. So St. Catherine's School noted that there was some students that were showing high ability, but their actual achievement data wasn't in line with their high ability, particularly in math. So at St. Catherine, we worked instead to look at doing some screening for their math assessment. We implemented the Acadian screener so that we could identify for them where the students were struggling. And then since then, they've started to apply some specific targeted interventions around, I believe it was math fluency, if I'm correct, Dr. Dubois. So we're looking at multiple entry points, and we're looking at a variety of different ways that we can support moving forward. And so we've already seen, even in this short time, some significant changes and some significant opportunities to address some learning gaps.
Trustee Coburn.
So I'm a little confused with the number of screens that we seem to be applying with regards to this. So I was surprised to read that the previous process was nomination-based. So I'm glad to see that we're moving towards some more empirical data. So if I look, I'll try to summarize this. If I look at the NGAT that we used at the 6 participating schools, 264 students were screened, 62 were identified as tier 2, so that's 25% of our students. And this may be too simplistic. Does the NGAT screen everything we need then with regard to this? Or the example you just raised with regards to math, you applied another screen. So how many screens do we apply? How many times do we apply it to identify students? I have to say I'm a little confused reading the presentation and actually hearing the presentation.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think that's an excellent question, and a lot of it falls kind of under the MTSS framework. The NGAT screener is a cognitive screener with test and retest reliability would really just be at this one point in time, as this is a singular data point. However, in conjunction with Acadians or DIBELS or the literacy data, we have a more holistic profile of a child. And looking at the NGAT, it creates a subsection of information about different aspects of the student's learning that we can then cross-reference with the data points that we have. So as previously mentioned, when we look at it alongside the literacy data that we have, the numeracy data, EQAO report cards, we have more holistic. How often does that happen? I think is still a process that is underway, and we're getting feedback on what that would look like.
Kira.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask, this is following up a little bit on Vice Chair Simpson's question. So would that mean if a student is in a tier 2 programming, would they be limited at all to accessing the enrichment opportunities, let's say, that a tier 3 student would have if they just fall short of the cusp of what it means to be, I guess, in the gifted programming? And then my second question is following up on Trustee Moore's question. Would you see merit in having this programming being developed in the high school system as well, having that kind of tier programming, having a gifted program for students as well? Thank you.
Right, through you, Mr. Chair. All right, I'll try and remember the first question. So it was around how would participating in tier 2 exclude student from participating in the PGL? Okay, so no, it doesn't. So in this case, when we had students that were already participating in PGL, but the NGAT testing, we still had them participate in the tier 2. So if they meet the criteria for the PGL program, they can do that, but they can have additional programming in their school. So that's not an exclusionary factor. Does that answer the question? Okay. All right, through you, Mr. Chair. So the second question was about how would this extend to high school? That is something that we haven't thought about yet in terms of the NGAT. Currently, the CCAT is used still in high schools and the kind of programming that students have in high school tends to be related to the type of courses and their individual projects and their enrichment through their personal choices. So not yet.
Jaden?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I just had two quick questions. For the additional opportunities, you mentioned how there's going to be additional opportunities. I was just curious on what were some of those. And then my second question was if we know how many students are currently enrolled in the PGL throughout the board, if there's like a number on that or any sort of data. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, I can start with question number 2. Currently, we have 180 students participating in the PGL program, which is grades 4, 5, and 6. And, sorry, I have to remember what question 1 was. Oh, further opportunities, that's right. There's lots of different opportunities in school. So when we look at the enrichment and what is really, so what we're doing through this project is looking at the evidence-based practices for supporting students that have high ability. And some of that is around higher order thinking, using critical thinking. Some of it is around hands-on experiences and hands-on learning that are very much related to students' personal interests. So some things that are currently in place to support students would be various clubs like the coding clubs or the, I'm thinking, when we're doing 3D printing and things like that. So the NGAT allows us to look at where, as Principal White was saying, some students that we might not previously have recognized as having these high abilities and how to introduce them to areas that would meet their strengths that come out through this testing that we wouldn't have otherwise noticed.
Trustee Whitted?
Thank you, Chair, through you. Just a quick question. I think one of my colleagues mentioned just the speed at which we're moving. I mean, it is a little slow. I think we've had a few presentations on this. I'm just wondering if we're losing students out of the system because they haven't been able to get screened and matched up with the proper supports. Are we losing them to, you know, the Ashburys of the world or, you know, private schools or, you know, some sort of external education delivery partner that might offer those if someone either pays or is just, you know, more of a simple upfront screening that they can do to get those supports. I'm just curious if we have any data or evidence that we're losing some of these students because we're not getting them what they need quick enough.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We have a number of students who, if they have an individual education plan, then the responsibility would be for the classroom teacher to modify the curriculum so that their needs were being met. So even though we are in the process now of creating the new program, we still are responsible for providing and meeting the needs of students who have a gifted learner profile, even though we may not have the full structure in place as of yet.
Is there any other questions? Trustee Moore?
Thank you. So for all of our Tier 2 parents out there, are you creating some sort of resource package for them? I know they'll go find the Association for Bright Children, but they might be going out and buying science and tech memberships when really their kid is way more interested in the science of hockey or a sport. So do you have any package you're creating for the parents to help them, guide them through this?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So far, when we give the NGAT results, we do include a parent letter that outlines some programming and some alternatives and things that might benefit the student. It's at a very basic start, and I think that's an excellent point of something we can consider as we move forward.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Can I get a mover, please? Trustee McEwen. Trustee Melito. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services dated May 6, 2026 entitled Gifted Screening and Intervention be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Memo from the Associate Director of Education re approval of policies rescinded, new, revised, and reviewed with no revisions. Associate Director Vellati, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. As you know, we review policies on a cycle which can be anywhere from 1 to 5 years, and this is the second set of policy which we have reviewed this current year. On March 3rd, we met with a number of interested parties, which included Trustee McEwen and Trustee Moore. On April 21st, a meeting was held with members of the board to review the proposed policy amendments. All this feedback has been reviewed and taken into consideration. Mr. Chair, I should mention some policies that were due to be reviewed and refined have been deferred because of some pending changing legislation. And once we receive that information, we will review the policies accordingly. So for example, we are waiting some changes around the Pupil Accommodation Review Guidelines, or PARG as we sometimes call it. So the respective policies in that area have been deferred. Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Trustee Moore?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Associate Director, if you could please give my thanks to all departments and superintendents and their staffs who went through all of these policies. It's a lot of work to go through it, and I really appreciated the work they put into it. Thank you.
You moving the motion? Trustee Coburn?
And likewise, I'd like to thank Trustee Moore and Trustee McEwen for doing the work on this too, because I know Sandra and Joanne, you went through them in detail, so thank you.
Has anybody got anything to add with this? I have to call a question first. Deemed to be read would help my voice very much. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. New business, there's none. Notice of motions, there's none. Confirmation of the action report, there is no action report from April 28th. So, administrative announcements, Madam Director.